In this final video, we'll work on adding some reflections to the scene, then we'll wrap things up by fine-tuning some of the materials. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish off the project. In the previous lesson, I accidentally duplicated all the core materials, so we need to get rid of those extra ones. I'm going to go up to Edit, pull this out, and in here we can just go down to Delete Unused Materials, and it'll get rid of those extra materials. Let's close this up. Now we need to add some reflections to the scene. We have nothing right now except for these lights, and the background is black. So we're going to use an HDRI map to give us our reflections. For that, we need to go up to our environment menu, and we need a sky object in here. So the sky object is going to surround our scene, but it needs a material. So let's go down here and let's go to Create, Materials, New Standard Material. Let's double click on this material, and let's go ahead and name this ENV for our environment. Let's turn off color, and let's turn off reflectance. Let's turn on luminance. Let's go inside the luminance channel, and next to texture here we can click on this long bar here, and we go to our text folder, and in here I have this HDR image called Spiegia di Mondello, and this is a file that I can't provide in the projects folder. If you do want this, you can head on over to, let me bring this up, it's called HDRI Haven, and this site has a ton of free HDR images. Just look for Spiegia di Mondello and download it, and also feel free to support them too. They're a really nice site to have. So let me minimize this. I'm going to grab this HDR image. Let's open it up. And now it's loaded. Let me go ahead and click and drag this material on our sky object. Now we'll see it pop up in our viewport. Let me go up to our render settings, and let me go to anti-aliasing, and let's change this from geometry to none. That way you get a faster render. And let's just make sure we turn this back onto at least geometry when we go to final rendering. We'll do that at the end here. Let's go to the layers manager, and so I'm just going to click and drag down and deselect everything, all these icons here for the generators, deformers, for expressions, and also our view and render icons, except for the fish. And let's also turn off our lights. So we'll do that too. Now let's render the scene and see what we have. All right, so you can see our sky is still showing, and we need to hide this. So let's go up to our sky and right click on it. Let's go down to render tags, and let's click on compositing. Let's go to our attributes manager, and under the tag tab, let's turn off scene by camera. And doing this will hide the sky from being visible from our camera. So let's go ahead and render this out. And now you see that all we have in our scene are our reflections. Some of these fish have reflections, other ones really don't. So let's focus on creating some reflections for one of these here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit closer. Let me jump out of the camera, and let's go to this black and red fish here, this Rasbosa fish. So let's render this and see what we have. So we have some reflections, but it's pretty dull. It's just a standard reflection. Let's give this more of an irradiance look to it. Fish scales react a little different with light. They reflect more of a rainbow color. So let's try to mimic that. I'm going to grab the shader for this fish, and that should be this one here, the Heracon Rasbosa. I'm going to go to the reflectance channel. Move this to the side here. I'm going to delete the layers that are in here for our reflectance channel. We have a few layers that I made by default, and they're not really helping much. So let's just delete these out. Delete that layer 1 and also the default specular. And now let's add our own material here. So I'm going to go up to add. I'm going to add this Beckman shader. So Beckman's a really good shader to use with metals. And even though the fish isn't really a metallic object, the scales kind of do have this metallic sheen to them. So let's use this. And let's go down to this layer Fresnel. And in here, let me scroll down a bit. In here we have a couple of options to use for Fresnel. We have dielectric, which is really good for liquids, for water and such. And we have conductor, which is really good for metals. So let's click on conductor. And this Fresnel setting itself, that has to do with how the object reacts with the shader when it's facing the camera. So basically anything that's right in front of the camera is negated, but there's a fall off along the edges. So we can see that better if we go under layer color here. Let's go down to texture, and here we're going to add a Fresnel also. You can see right here on the shader ball, anything that's facing right in front of the camera will have no effect, but the sides will have, there's this fall off, and that's where the reflection is, but there's not any reflection here on the front. So let's render this and see what this looks like. So you can see it here, there's not much of an effect here, but we have this really nice fall off here to the side. So let's click inside this Fresnel shader, and let's twirl down this gradient, this little arrow here, and let's go down to load preset. we're going to give this gradient here, this heat 2, this rainbow color. Let's click on that. We're going to get this really cool little rainbow effect on it. What we need to do to this gradient though, we need to have a black knot here to the right. So the right side represents more of the center area of the shader ball and this fish here. So let's go ahead and click on this first knot here on the left, and I'm going to click on this last knot, and there's going to be these little two handles that show up. So I'm going to click and drag these over to the left. Then I'm just going to click here to the right of this red knot. And then for this new knot, I'm going to make it black. So now you see that as soon as I made it black, it disappeared here from the front. So I want this effect only to affect the edges of the fish. So go ahead and click render. So now we get this. Let me move back a little bit. And if we turn to the side, we're going to start seeing that this cool looking irradiance effect. We're going to see it better if we turn on the lights. So let me go ahead and turn all the lights back on, and let's hit render on this. And now we're starting to see a little more of the effect. There's a little bit too much yellow here, so we can always tweak our shader. Let's go back to this Harlequin shader. Let's get rid of this yellow knot, so we can just click and drag it out of the way and it should disappear. I'm going to grab this green knot, double click on it, and I'm going to give this more of an orange color. There we go. So you can see that that changed, and let's render this again. Should look a little better. There we go. Kind of has a subsurface scattering effect too. Okay, so that looks great. So I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to do the same treatment for the rest of the fish, but I'll do that on my own. That way you don't have to watch me do that. Let's go back to our scene camera, and now let's go ahead and go to the layers manager, and let's bring in our bubbles. So I'm going to go ahead and click on our bubbles view icon, also render icon, and let's bring in our generator and turn on the animation icon too. So we see all the bubbles in the scene now. Let's render this and see what we get. So we're missing reflection and transparency on these bubbles. So let's go ahead and give them a material. I'm just going to double click in our material manager here in an empty spot. That created a new material. Let's double click on the material, and let's call this material bubbles. For this one, we'll go down to reflectance. Let's get rid of the default specular layer, and let's add a new shader. And this time we'll do a GGX shader. So again, this is meant for metals, but this will work great with bubbles. So all we have to do for this, now that we have our metal look for this, let me add this to the bubbles. I'm going to minimize this here quickly, and we're going to grab all the bubbles in the scene, just our groups, and let's right click on our material and hit apply, and that'll apply that to all the bubbles. And let's bring back the material, and now let's go into the alpha channel, and in here let's go to our texture drop down, and let's also grab a Fresnel shader. And now with this Fresnel shader, we have this black and white gradient that's giving us that Fresnel effect here. Anything in the front of the shader we're not seeing, we're getting transparency, but off to the sides we're getting reflection. So let's render this quickly and see what we get. And we should have our bubbles with some transparency. Now, I'm seeing that they're picking up some refraction from the sky environment, so let's take care of that. Let's go ahead and minimize the material editor. Let's go to the compositing tag of the sky, and let's go into the attributes manager. And here we can turn off scene by refraction. And now let's hit render, and we should get some clear bubbles now. That looks pretty good. I'll stop this now. And since we're here, I'm noticing that we have our God Ray fragments here in our viewport. We can just hide those from our viewport by going to our God Ray fragments, and let's double click on this top traffic light until it becomes red. And now those are gone. They're hidden, but they'll still affect the scene. Let's go ahead and go back to our layers manager, and let's turn everything on now. We're pretty much to the point where we can save this out and render it out too. So I'm just going to click and drag on everything, all of our icons here, to turn everything on. Let's go back to our render settings, and let's change our anti-aliasing back. I'm going to have this be set to geometry. Best is always the way to go, but geometry looks pretty good too. So it depends on how much CPU power you have and how good you want it to make it look, but I'll leave it at geometry. All right, I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to go ahead and test render this out. And while this is rendering, I'm going to pause this, and I'll return as soon as it's done. So here's the result of the render. It's looking really nice. The only thing I noticed is that I forgot to add a material to this needle coral. They're still white, so I'm going to go down to the material editor. Let's double click inside here, and let's grab a new material, and I'm just going to give it a color here of an orange color. So let's try 220 and 130 for the color, And let's bring this down a little bit here. We'll do 19 for the blue. And let's go down to the reflectance channel here, and let's get rid of this default specular. And let's go ahead and add a Beckman shader. I'm going to go down to the layer color, and in here we'll grab a Fresnel. We'll get that reflection here only on the sides. I'm going to bring the reflection down, way down actually, about to 4%, and the specular strength to about 3%. I'm going to bring this roughness up just a little bit too, just so that we get more of a satin type of reflection. Let's close down the material editor. Let's go inside our coral group, and let's find that needle coral. Here it is. So I'm just going to click and drag this orange material on top of the needle coral. Let's name this. We'll call this needle coral. And let's go ahead and render this out again. And I'm going to pause it while I do that. Okay, so here's the result. Now the needle coral is orange, and that looks good. So at this point, we are done with the project. So let me show you what the animation looks like rendered out. All right, let's press play. And there you go. So there's a few more particles in the scene. I added those in post in After Effects, and I also did a little color adjustment, but we can see we have movement in our coral, our algae's moving, and our bubbles are moving as well, so everything looks pretty good. All right, so great. Really enjoyed making this series. So I just want to give a special thanks to the good people at Cineversity. Thank you for having me work on this project. It was fun. I hope you all picked up a few tips along the way, and I hope those tips help you with your projects. If you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you for watching.